Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this month's Discover event, part of our Discover series. And now on to the topic of discussion for today, which is the application process for applying to university. And hopefully we're here to help people who are either perhaps applying themselves or who know somebody either in the family, a friend, you're a teacher to somebody who is thinking about applying to study at university. And hopefully David, who is our speaker today, will cover all the things that you might need when you're applying, and we'll be covering things like the actual application cycle itself, key things to cover in UCAS, student finance, and any additional support. It's being held in May because this times with the cycle for medicine and dentistry specifically, as those applications tend to need to be earlier in the year, and we will be running another event in September for more general applications. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to pass over to David, who is our speaker today, who is a student recruitment coordinator and has worked in higher education and the recruitment and outreach fields for the past 7 years. So over to you, David.
So hi there. So I'm going to cover the applying to university sort of process today. So I'll start with a bit of an introduction and looking at some of the benefits of higher education before moving on to the nitty-gritty of the UCAS application process and how that timeline and all the different sections and things that are involved with that. And then I'll move on to what you do after you've actually applied to university in terms of looking at accommodation, student finance, extra support that's on offer, and even the subject of contextual offers. So just to make a start, so why should students look at higher education? So in terms of graduate prospects, it is generally considered that you get a higher earning job as well as a higher level job due to having a degree. About 70% of graduate jobs, it doesn't matter which degree subject you have graduated from, it just matters that you've got a degree, generally a classification of 2-1 or higher, and demonstrate that higher education and that higher learning. You also get to meet people and have a variety of different friendships and networking opportunities. So, for example, could be meeting someone who is from a different part of the world, different part of the country, and becoming friends. I'm still friends with people who I went to university with, even 10 years later. And all of the different networking opportunities. You might meet people or hear about businesses or opportunities that if it hadn't been for going to university, you wouldn't have found out about. It's an opportunity to try something new, whether that be a sports team, a society, a volunteering opportunity, some part-time work, or even in the subject that you're studying. Some subjects you don't have the opportunity to study below university level, either due to the facilities or requirements that are needed, or generally sort of it's very specific or very niche and you want to learn more about that. So it does give you a wide opportunity to try something different. You do gain lots of skills, so a variety of skills that are transferable, and that's really key for moving on to employment afterwards as well. Something that I'll talk about at a couple of different points in this presentation, and you'll hear throughout the sort of life is all about those transferable skills and how you can learn something and transfer it to another place. And then for some people, it is continuing studying the subject that they enjoy. So it could be that someone's really passionate about English and has obviously studied English throughout their entire education, going right the way through and decided that they really want to take it further. They really love, could be a particular area. So they might go more specific, something like 18th century literature or something like that, and just go and study what they're passionate about and really enjoy. There's a wide variety of different opportunities that come around during higher education as well. So for example, there's the opportunity to get involved with research, there's an opportunity to study abroad, work abroad, take a work placement as part of your degree, all gives you invaluable experience that really sometimes can't be got in any other way or any other setting. So it is really valuable. So just meeting some of the people, the volunteering aspect, that you can get involved with, just meeting people around campus, joining a course or a sports team or a club that will really sort of help you with meeting new people or getting that experience. As well, a graduate with an undergraduate degree can earn on average over £10,000 more per year than someone who doesn't have a degree. So there is that sort of monetary benefit as well, which is always worth mentioning. So then I'm going to go on to UCAS now. So it is the sort of largest part of the presentation, and it will go into a fair amount of detail. So for those of you who don't know, UCAS stands for the University and College Admission Service. So it sort of encompasses everything. So it's the online admission service for lots of different course types. So it allows users on the UCAS website to search and apply for courses. It also allows those applicants to track their applications, see responses from universities. There's lots of different information about different areas of university, including accommodation, student finance. There's areas for parents and carers, just all sorts of different information on there about different levels of higher education that just explain sort of what university is and goes into as much help and support that is possible. So this is sort of just a very quick snippet from what you'd look as if you just typed in ucas.com. So as you can see, there's different options from all the way from further education to postgraduate. There's information on apprenticeships, on careers advice on there as well. There's a fantastic search tool that's built into UCAS that you can search for particular courses, for particular universities, even for apprenticeships in some instances as well. So there's lots of opportunities on UCAS for people to seek out. So now on to the UCAS timeline. So this is what would span the application cycle for someone who is considering entry to university. So we're going to look at this as a point of view from someone who would be starting in September 2023. Okay, now UCAS will be open for registrations from next week, so people can register for UCAS. However, you won't be able to submit a UCAS application until September. So you can register and start filling out details and things, but you cannot actually submit an application until September. And for anybody who is considering medicine, dentistry, veterinary science, or wanting to apply to either Oxford or Cambridge, the deadline for applications will be the 15th of October 2022. So it does come very quick for those who are returning to sixth form or college in September. It only gives you a few weeks before those applications have to be turned around, and everything has to be complete on them as well. For anyone who isn't considering medicine, dentistry, veterinary, or applying to Oxford or Cambridge, so any other course at any other university, the deadline will be the 26th of January 2023. Okay. However, the school or college where the young person who's applying attends will have their own internal deadlines, generally before Christmas, so that they can get the applications in, get them checked, attach teacher references. Colleges will have hundreds of students who are applying each year, so it's really important that they have that extra time to be able to check through all the applications and they look all good on their end and attach their teacher references before they're sent off to UCAS, who send them on to the universities. From when universities start accepting those applications in October, they'll start considering who's going to be invited to interview, and the invitations for those will be sent out generally between November and February. So typically for those courses who do have the deadline of the 15th of October, so your medicine, dentistry and veterinary science, they will be courses that will interview. So whether it's mini medical interviews, multiple mini interviews, sorry, for medicine, whether it's a formal interview for dentistry and veterinary science, you will be invited for an interview for those courses. So it's important to keep an eye out for those interview invitations, because they'll come directly from the university. From December to February, those interviews will take place, some even spilled into March this year. So that's when it's really important to get those interviews, have done prep for them, so that you attend those interviews so that you can get your offers in. In March 2023, that's when offers are generally sent out from universities. So they have up until the deadline sort of changes every year. Sometimes it's the end of March. This year it was May for medicine and dentistry, to get all of their responses out to students. So some interviewed quite late this year, just with the knock-on effect from COVID. There's generally a date in June where students must reply to their offers. So either accepting or decline them, which I'll go on to in a little bit more information in a bit. So students must have done that by a particular date in June. That's yet to be confirmed. Then it would come to results day in August, when students would get their results, and then for them to then start university come September. So it is done within a year, but it will span the whole year. So it'll be on students' minds for that entire time and through the time when they're doing their exams as well. So it's a very stressful year for them. So now actually onto the process and going through the different stages of the UCAS form. So when you register, users will have to fill in all of their personal information. So things like their date of birth, address, and education history, as well as potentially any special educational needs or disability information, just to make universities aware of that. Make sure all of this information is correct. If there's anything missing or incorrect, it could cause problems with their application and therefore their transition through to university in the long run. Then the next thing that you'd enter into an application form would be qualifications in any work. So users would fill out all of the qualifications. So that includes ones they've already achieved, such as their GCSEs, and then what A-levels or alternative level 3 qualifications that they are currently studying. With A-levels, all those level 3 qualifications, it would be the predicted grades that would go into the UCAS form if they're still in the process of studying them. And then that's what the universities will base their offers on, based on their predicted grades. This is also an opportunity to include any paid or voluntary work that's been done. Voluntary work and paid work as well always looks really good on an application, especially with solid grades, as it shows really good time management and organisation skills as well to universities, and being able to manage multiple things at work once and multiple workloads.
Can I ask a really quick question? Sorry, just to interrupt. Yeah. If you're say you're resitting, say you're a 19-year-old student, so you've done your A-levels first time around, you're resitting some A-levels. Do you have to input the grade you got the first time around or the predicted grade for the resit that you're doing when you're applying?
So you would put both.
Okay.
So, and there's an option to indicate whether or not you're resitting.
Really helpful to know. Thank you.
Part of that. Not a problem. So then it comes on to choices. So now this is the option that'll take the most time for students to complete. It's really quick to put in your personal information and predicted grades, etc. Whereas your choices need to get down. There's over 52,000 different courses across the various 350 higher education institutions across the UK. So trying to get that down to 5 choices is very, very difficult for some students. If students have a idea in their mind of what they want to study, then that obviously is a very good tool at narrowing that down. However, they'll still be inundated with choices about where they could go. And that's where things like UCAS fairs and school AG fairs, talks, presentations, keeping an eye on university websites for different activities you can get involved with, going along to open days, etc., can really help students make those choices and get them down to 5. So they can either be the same course at different universities or various courses at the same university. So what we'd always say though is pick the course before you pick the university. So it's really important that you're going to be studying. We've had instances, and teachers will say the same, where students have said, I really want to stay local, so I'm going to go to Liverpool University for a school that's maybe in Liverpool. However, when it's come around to them picking the course that they want to do, they haven't offered the course that they want. So it's then thinking about that. So it's actually, I'm going to be studying something for years that's potentially going to have a knock-on effect for my career for the rest of my life. I need to maybe look a bit more broader. So it needs to be thinking about moving away or looking at a different university in the local area. So there's various different options about that. And it's also looking at the content of the degree as well. So an English degree, for example, at Newcastle wouldn't be the same as an English degree at Liverpool, because there's different modules. There's not a national curriculum like there is at schools up to A level. So it would be looking at what the different modules that will be offered, that will be taught, and there can be a whole wide range. So using English as an example, things like, as I said, like before, the 18th century literature, it could be American literature, it could be science fiction, it could be children, it could be fantasy, it could be Gothic, and there's so many different options. So it's a lot of it sometimes comes down to what the lecturers are qualified to teach in and what they've done their research and speciality in. And so it is important to look at the actual content of degrees, not just pick because it says English. Okay. So once you've done that and narrowed it down, or decided what you want to choose, the UCAS course finder is really good for that. So if you want to look, say, type in English to the UCAS course finder, it'll bring up every university that offers an English degree. So then you can make that list and start to narrow it down from there. One thing to note is that if you're interested in applying to medicine, dentistry, or veterinary sciences or veterinary medicine, you can only apply to use 4 options for those. So out of the 5, you can't apply to 5 for those particular subjects. So you can use your 5th choice, but it cannot be either medicine, dentistry, or veterinary science. So for example, lots of people who apply for medicine either put biomedical science or pharmacy as their 5th option, because it's in the same sort of wheelhouse. However, it's obviously not medicine, but they can make use of those full 5 choices. Okay. It is also recommended that you only make 1 application to either Oxford or Cambridge, not both. Okay. So then onto the personal statement, which after making your choices is probably the hardest part of the UCAS form. Now there'll be lots of guidance from teachers, from universities coming in to do talks around this as well in various schools and colleges. But it is obviously something that is used by universities. There is a 4,000 character limit for a personal statement. So that is not words, it is characters. So it is really important to keep a track of that and not count the words. So what we'd recommend is you write it out in Microsoft Word first. This way you can see the number of characters shown in there and keep a copy saved if there's a problem with UCAS track. As well, UCAS, the website, times out when you're logged into your application. So we would never recommend just typing it straight into UCAS. And then you've also got that document there for if you need to adapt it to a covering letter, if you wanted to use it for something else in the future, a statement about yourself and your achievements. It's not often you sit and think about actually what you've done so far. So it's good to keep that document there. It's a real good chance for students and applicants to sell themselves to universities. Universities will use personal statements to consider applications that have just done a near miss to miss out on their grades. They'll use it to decide between very similar academic applicants. So if they've got very similar grade profiles and academic history, they can use their personal statement to differentiate between those and sort of use that as how to decide on whether or not someone should be made an offer or not. So for example, at Newcastle, when it comes to our medicine program, it is used as part of the offer making process, the personal statement. Things to include in a personal statement is always an introduction, always some information around about why you're interested in the course, what extra information you found out about the course, why you're particularly interested in that subject area. So if there's anything that's really interested you about a particular area and you'd want to learn more about it, or anything else. Any hobbies or activities or extracurriculars that you've done, and always trying to link them to the course that you're interested in. Those transferable skills are key, okay? Things like work experience or volunteering is a good place to mention that as well, and any skills that you've learned from them. For example, looking at medicine again, before COVID, it was at times easier to get some clinical work experience, where that's a little bit more difficult now. However, any general work experience or volunteering that can be done, talk about how those skills can be transferred toward medicine. So for example, if it is volunteering in a charity shop or working in retail, it's how those customer service skills will translate to patient interactions, and how those organization and time management skills will translate to clocking in, clocking out, shift work, etc., things like that, and managing your schoolwork with your part-time jobs and extracurriculars, because doctors currently need to constantly keep up with what's current, so managing that alongside working. So it's seeing how all of those skills can be transferable and working that into your personal statement. Okay, so after the personal statement, that you then submit your UCAS form. Now there is a cost for that. If you only want to submit one course option, like you were gung-ho and really set on, I'm only applying for this one course at one university, you can just pay £20 for that. However, if you want to apply to 2 or more, it's £25. It's always worth trying to have those few extra options there as well. So once you've submitted your application form, it could be instantaneous within a couple of days where you hear something back. It could be a little bit longer, especially if it's not an interview-based program. But that waiting game can be a bit nerve-wracking from personal experience. When it comes round to it, though, there's 3 possible outcomes that would come from submitting an application. So the first would be an unconditional offer. Now, this would be unconditional of any, doesn't matter what would happen, they've got their place at university regardless of outcomes, as long as they complete any outstanding requirements or examinations or anything. So it doesn't matter what they actually get for it as long as they complete everything. However, these are becoming a bit less frequent, as certain grades may be required if you wanted to change your mind about a program, if you wanted to go into a graduate scheme. So some graduate schemes will require you to have a 2-1 and then equivalent to 120 UCAS points, which would be equivalent to 3 Bs. So thinking about things like that. So it's thinking around that the grades might be needed in the long term. The most common option and offer would be a conditional offer. So this would be you've got a place at university if you get the grades or UCAS points required. So some universities will make an offer based on, right, we'll make you an offer as long as you get an A and 2 Bs. Some universities will make an offer as long as you achieve 120 UCAS points. So it's just dependent on which university you go to or applying to, whether or not they're asking for grades or UCAS points. Some conditions might be less common. So it could be, for example, you need to get a minimum of a C in chemistry, for example, or it could be that you've applied for a contextual offer program, which I will talk about in a little bit. So, for example, at Newcastle, ours is partners. So our conditional offer, if you've applied for the partners scheme, would be as long as you get the partners reduced offer grades and complete our partners academic summer school. So that will be the condition of the offer that you get. Okay. Finally, an option which nobody likes to see, unfortunately, but does happen, is the unsuccessful. You've not been offered a place at that particular institution. Okay. Then it's what is the individual's response to that. So their response, which again has to be done by that date in June, which is to be confirmed at the moment. And so the individual needs to decide if they're lucky enough to have received 5 offers, they have to get that down to 2. If they've got 2 offers, they have to decide which to put first, etc. So the firm choice is their first choice university. So this is where they will go if they get the required grades. So it's generally the one that you want to go to the most. The insurance choice would be the backup university. So it's what would typically be a lower grade requirement than your firm choice. Okay, now I can sit here having applied 10, 11 years ago to university and did the most stupid thing that we tell people not to do, is I applied to the same university for 2 different courses with exactly the same entry requirements and put them as my firm and insurance choice. So when I unfortunately didn't quite get the grades that I was after, due to some personal circumstances, I was in the boat of having to go on to clearing because my firm and insurance choice were exactly the same entry requirements at the same university. So please, if you are someone who's applying or if you're supporting someone who's applying, do not let them do that. I say that as having made that mistake myself. If you have had more than 2 options, you can decline other options. Okay, so you've got to decline all the ones that aren't your firm or insurance choice, which feels very odd. So then it comes to results day. So it's a lovely Thursday in August, 8 o'clock in the morning. UCAS will have received results directly the week before and have passed them on to universities, and they will update track, and which will then go live at 8 o'clock on that Thursday morning. There's an embargo in place before that. So users will maybe get a notification, or depending on their settings, or have to log in and may already know whether or not they've been accepted to their firm or insurance choice university before they've actually got their results. So depending on their school, college situation and the particular COVID regulations that that school has in, they may send them out on that morning, or you may have to go and collect them. So, but all results are embargoed until 8 o'clock on that Thursday in August, which is the 18th this year, but we don't know what day it's going to be next year. So students will know whether or not they've got their firm choice. If they haven't got their firm choice, they may see that they've got their insurance choice. They may see that they haven't quite got the grades that they wanted, but they've got their insurance choice university. And some, unfortunately, may get the information that they haven't been successful with their firm or insurance choice, but not yet know their grades. So that's when we would come on to clearing, so which is sort of the final part of the UCAS potential applications. So if the users miss their grades for their firm or insurance choice, they can look for a place through clearing. So the UCAS website will have a clearing option that lists all the courses at universities with available places through clearing. So what our tips would be for event that, if anybody does end up in that situation, will be to go and collect their results before contacting universities. Universities won't be able to do anything without the students' results, and if it's not a university that they've already applied to as their firm or insurance choice, which they've already been declined from, they won't have that information on record. So the student would need to get their results before contacting universities. It's really important to contact universities as early as possible. Some courses might have caps, so we'll fill up the further that the day goes on. So it is a bit of a frantic, mad rush, again, from personal experience. Don't be afraid to call back. So if someone said that they'll call you back when you've spoken to someone, ring them back. There's hundreds of people working at universities over clearing. So just give them a call back. If someone's particularly nervous or worried about clearing and whether or not they might end up into it, have a look at the university websites the week before or something and note down some of the clearing numbers for universities that you might want to investigate if they've got any options available for you. They're generally advertised a month or 2 before anyway, so just write those numbers down. And be calm and methodical on the phone, being both on each side of it, someone who takes a call and someone who has made the call. Being really upset on the phone is very difficult for you and for the member of staff on the other end of the phone. Okay, There is an option as well for if someone does better than they've been predicted, so want to go to maybe a higher level institution that had a higher entry requirements, you can inquire through clearing about that as well. So there used to be something called adjustment, but that no longer exists. It's just all encompassed in the clearing package. So you would contact potential universities that have higher entry requirements, and want to inquire about whether or not they would have a place for you on that program.
Can I ask a quick question specifically about dentistry, medicine, or veterinary science?
Yes.
Typically speaking, how many, if any, spaces do you get in clearing for those? Because they're quite restricted courses and you need an interview. If you don't get the position in one of your two, are there typically any spaces, and is there any more complicated process because you'd have to go through that process again?
So yes, it can, and clearing can be open for medicine, dentistry and veterinary science programs. It depends on the university, and it depends how big their how many offers they've made, how many places they've got. Some overestimate, some underestimate. You don't know how people are going to be done. It's been very difficult over the past couple of years with teacher assessed grades, etc. and things. So it's been hard to quite judge numbers of offers to make. So what they tend to do is still open into clearing if they have spaces. However, those spaces will be, there'll be a cap. They'll know beforehand how many spaces that they've got and how many people they can interview to then go on to that. So what they'll do is they will still invite people for an interview, whether it's virtual, whether it's over the phone, whether they invite people who are in to come and interview in person, either later on the Thursday or on the Friday or early the next week. For those courses, it's not as instantaneous. It's not just limited to medicine, dentistry and veterinary science as well. Other courses that may interview. So for example, there's some education programs at various institutions and other science programs that may want to interview, like nursing, etc. So whereas yes, you could get a place through clearing, but it might not be as instantaneous for someone who maybe, say, is looking for a place in business through clearing, which typically doesn't interview and they can get an answer just with their grades. So on to Clearing Plus. So this is a new option that will be coming in this year where UCAS will automatically match students' application to similar courses and universities that are available in clearing. You'll be able to see the top 50 matches. You can still search for other courses in clearing as well. If you do like a match, you click interested and then the university would contact you rather than you having to contact the university if you're in clearing. And it saves you time searching through the courses because it'll match you to it. Okay. So that is sort of UCAS from what it is to right the way through to clearing and results day. So in terms of the UCAS process. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move on to sort of a couple of things after application. So first thing I'll mention is, yes, this can sometimes be after application, sometimes it can be for your choices, but open days or offer holder days are really important. So they're an opportunity for students to talk to lecturers, talk to current students, have a look around the university facilities, the city and surrounding areas, have a look at the accommodation, have a look at where they're going to be living for the next 3, potentially longer years. Some students often move away from university and then don't leave those cities. So it's really interesting. It's really, I think that Germany's one of them by the look of it. So it's really important that they like where they're going to go. So these days, offer holder days, open days, are really good for help students make their decisions, because it can sometimes be hard to narrow down those 5 choices to 2 as well. So these are all great opportunities for that. When it comes to applying for accommodation, most applications for accommodation will open in the spring. and the chosen universities will be in touch with the applicants to let them know when this is and how they apply for their particular accommodation. Some universities do it on a first come, first served basis. Some universities just, it doesn't matter when you apply, as long as you apply by a certain date, and it all goes into a random pot. That's how Newcastle does it. We recommend making an application for both your firm and insurance choice universities, so you are ready to go once you know where you're headed. Because if you did end up going to your insurance choice university and it was, say, on a first come, first served basis, etc., so it is generally guaranteed for all first year students. However, it's probably slim pickings if you left it till the last minute come results day. You don't have to stay in university accommodation if they don't want to. Some students will live at home or choose private accommodation as well. But typically for the first year, it's most common for students to be in university halls of residence if they've moved away. So where would students like to stay, whether or not it's university-owned halls, whether it's private halls, or whether it's a managed partnership? So there's a couple like that with the Newcastle University. So, and it's thinking about whether or not you have to pay a deposit, etc. So whether it's catered or self-catered, so can the student cook for themselves and feed themselves? Whether or not they want a shared bathroom in a flat, whether they want their own ensuite, whether or not they want their own self-contained studio flat. Sort of your prices increase with your amenities. So it's thinking about that as well. Kitchen facilities, so ovens, microwaves, all of that sort of thing. Is there a gym on site, entertainment room, etc.? And what the distance is from the campus as well. It might be the best halls at a really good rate. However, it's an hour away from campus, which just isn't practical for a 9 o'clock lecture, etc. So it's just having to think about that. So what can you expect in halls? Oh, seem to have a picture staying there. So sometimes their fire alarms will go off. There'll be clean checks. Security is 24 hours. There'll be parcels collected from reception. They can have visitors to stay over. There is a sense of community in halls of residence as well. They can make it feel like home and decorate it. And everybody's in the same boat, especially that first week. Okay. So then we've just got a couple of pictures of what typical sort of student halls would look like. Even some with a gym. So after accommodation, probably the next important thing is how you're going to pay for everything. So student finance, if there's one thing anybody takes away whenever I do a student finance talk, it is not to take this one thing away. It's that it's not like traditional debt. Do not let people say, oh, student finance, student debt, it's going to cost thousands, deter you from university. You will only ever pay back what you can afford, dependent on what you earn, not how much you owe. Anybody who's interested in more information about and how it's more like a tax rather than debt, Martin Lewis is a really good explanation of this, especially for parents, carers, etc., those who will be supporting their young people at university. It can be applied from early spring, so it's generally from the end of January to March when it opens. It would be a maintenance and tuition fee loan that students would apply for. Tuition fee loan is not household income assessed. It will be automatically given up to the maximum, which is currently frozen at £9,250 per year. Whereas the maintenance loan would depend on household income and the location of the university. So for example, there's 3 maintenance loan rates. So there's a living at home rate, there's a living away from the home outside of London rate, and living away from the home in London rate. Okay, so it's obviously given that London is a higher, more expensive place to live, so there's higher student finance available for that. And whereas living at home, your costs probably aren't going to be as high, so it's a lower rate. And then it's on a sliding scale of household income up to around about £65,000-70,000 per year, I think. And then it's always just the minimum amount, which is about 4.5 at the moment. And then that maximum amount which would be for anyone with household income of below £25,000, is currently for the living away from home outside of London rate is 9,700 per year. Okay, so that would then be paid back in that would then be paid to the student in 3 installments. So in September, January, and then May, April time, depending when Easter is. So throughout the year, and that would be paid to the student directly, whereas the tuition fee would be paid directly to the university. Both loans are there to be paid back after earning a certain threshold. Currently, that threshold is £27,295. And then it's only 9% of everything you pay over that figure. So for example, if someone was earning £30,000, it's 9% of the difference between 27,295 to 30,000, which works out as £15 a month. And that would come directly off your payslip as tax, like tax and national insurance does, and would just be a figure on that. Nobody has to worry about making payments. There's no charges for missed payments. If you did dip below the 27,295 threshold, it would be stopped paying again. Okay, so moving on. So there is other forms of finance as well. So student finance application, you'll be asked to share that with universities or institutions you're applying for, and that will allow universities to have access to that figure so they can see whether or not you'd be eligible for bursaries or scholarships. So that could be for if household income's under a certain threshold, you could get a scholarship or a grant. There's ones from student finance as well, such as adult dependent grant, childcare grant. There's the disabled students allowance. So if anybody has mental health issue or physical impairment, dyslexia, dyspraxia, etc., disabled students allowance has a package of up to over £25,000 per year for students to access in terms of support as well. Student bank accounts as well, it's always good to change that so that there's no banking charges for students as well. So there's lots of opportunities there. So now I'm going to talk about some entry routes and contextual offers that I mentioned before. So there's different, so contextual offers is where universities might offer a lower offer, a summer school, extra support for someone who's deemed to be from a background that maybe has high progression to university, has had some extra issues or had challenges throughout their time, or is from what we call a widening participation background. So, for example, the Partners Scheme is the supported entry route in Newcastle. This route will help students receive an offer of up to 3 grades lower than the typical offer. So, for example, medicine entry requirements are normally 3 A's. For a Partners student who met one of our 15 eligibility criteria, you only have to meet 1, the offer would be 3 B's and the completion of the Partners Academic Summer School. Partners is Newcastle specific, so check out other options at different universities across the country or that you may be interested in applying to. There's a wide range of different support that's available at university as well. So such as things like I've mentioned, like the supported entry route, and it's not just support pre-application, it's support all the way through your time at university as well. So there's partner support pre-entry to university and then post-entry up until you graduate as well. The student advice services, so if anybody needs any advice on finance issues, guidance issues, welfare issues, go and speak to the student advice services. We've got a careers service as well, which is available for students after they graduate for up to 2 years as well. And we've got health and wellbeing services. So if anybody wants to or needs to access those at any point during their time at university, they're there. We've also got various mentoring schemes as well. So with current students, with academics, to allow students to get the most out of their time at university. So that is pretty much it in terms of what my presentation covers. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen there. And I see there's 1 or 2 questions in the chat and Q&A, so I'm going to have a look at them. So how can you tailor a personal statement if the course differs between institutions? For example, earth science, which will have different minor options depending on the university. So that is difficult. It will be one personal statement for all 5 of your choices at university. So what I would say would be to talk about earth science in the general terms of what interests you particularly about earth science, trying to individually tailor something for each institution within your personal statement would just make it a bit too messy. And it's trying to talk about something that is common between them all, or what interests you about earth science. Okay, just in the chat. The threshold will be 25,000 in 2023. That's something that's that they're talking about. It's not actually confirmed yet. So there is potential that there will be a new student finance plan which will come into effect. However, that is not actually confirmed yet. So we can't really talk about it as if it's happening because it's not confirmed yet. Please, can you explain how UCAS point scoring works? Yeah, so each qualification at level 3 will be given, and each grade within that is given a point value. So if you're going off A levels, for example, a grade B at A level is worth 40 points. A grade C is 32 points. It's in multiples of 8. So that, whereas a distinction or a merit from a BTEC or something would have a different point value as well. So it's just depending on which institution, on which system they use. So Newcastle uses grades, so we would make you an offer of 3 Bs, etc. Whereas another institution may make an offer of 120 UCAS points from a minimum of 2 A levels, including chemistry, if it was for a science program, etc. So that would be a typical offer from one of those institutions. So it's just because sometimes points can be from other things as well. So for example, a grade 8 in music carries UCAS tariff points. So it's just not very many, but it does carry them. So it can sometimes tip someone in someone's favor for UCAS points in terms of applying to an arts course. So there's a few different options there as well. There was some other questions I had, so I'm just going to see if I've answered everything. So someone asked about applying, so sitting UCAT with dyslexia. That will always be accepted. There's not a problem with that. It's actually against the law to discriminate on someone on that. And there's a massive support package in place for students who would have dyslexia at university as well. So that's not a problem at all. So I've got one here as well. So as a lecturer at university, what would we need to write in a recommendation letter? I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that, to be honest. However, it is probably course dependent and would be related to what the admissions team would want from that. So it would be better to speak to admissions at whichever relevant institution someone was applying to. I've got a question about financial support available for mature students in relation to master's programs. It would depend on the individual institution for any specific support for mature students. However, there is the postgraduate loan system through student finance, where you can get up to, I think the figure's about 11,000, which would be a non-household income assessed loan, and it would be that figure for you that you'd be eligible for, but and you would be expected to pay your tuition fees and any maintenance stuff out of that, but that would be it. there's no extra or anything on top of that. Couple more questions. Where do we find out about UCAS fairs? So all UCAS fairs are on the UCAS website. So they are always published well in advance. There's a calendar of events for the year. For if anybody is local and want to come to the Newcastle or the Tyneside event, as it is on the 14th of June at the Utilita, formerly Metro Radio Arena. So that is there on the 14th of June. But all the UCAS fairs for different places around the country are published on the UCAS website. Okay. So how many years does a loan cover, e.g. if a student resits a year or changes course? That's a really good question. So it will always be the length of the course plus 1 gift year. So for example, if someone is applying for a 3-year program, so say business, it would be 3 years plus a gift year. So that would be, for example, as you've said, if you resit, if change course or decided to switch from business to computing or something like that, that would cover you for 1 extra year. If you did have need another year on top of that, you would either have to apply for personal extenuating circumstances with student finance or self-fund for that 1 year. Okay, so if it was a medicine program, for example, and it was a 5-year degree, student finance would cover the 5 years plus a gift year. So it just depends on the length of the course. Would I advise visiting a university outside of open days? It depends whether it's local or not and what options they've got for visiting. So for example, at Newcastle, we have campus tours, as well as open days, things like that. If you just wanted to have a wander around the campus, etc., there's probably no harm in that. However, if you want to speak to people and actually get to speak to, for example, the services, academics, current students, etc., it's always better to go to a scheduled event because those people will be there for you to ask questions. If you just rocked up if at a university when there wasn't an event on, the chances are those people are busy and won't be able to speak to you. Let me just have a look at the other chat. I have 2 twins hoping to go to uni at the same time. How does this affect the financial thresholds? I'm sorry, it's not good news. It does, student finance will ask you whether or not you've got any other dependents, and you can put that information in. However, it does not change if you're supporting more than one sibling at university at the same time. It will still be the same finance that based on your income. It's not the best in terms of supporting 2 at once. My parents were very lucky my sister didn't go till after I'd finished. But no, it's I had that question actually just last week, and it was the first time I'd had it, and it is just the same, unfortunately. So I'm sorry about that. Is there still stigma attached to the old polytechnic universities? Depends who you ask. I personally went to one of the old polytechnic universities and had a fantastic time. And it all comes down to student experience, I think, as well, and what you make out of it, and how much effort you put into. There's certainly a lot less stigma than there used to be. Okay. How does student finance work with a year abroad? So it depends whether or not this is a year that's part of your course or whether or not you're taking a year out from your course. Typically, if it's a year that's part of your course, it would be that you would be covered for student finance. So your tuition fee would be paid to Newcastle University in the same way. And then Newcastle would have an arrangement, whichever university you were attending abroad, and they would you wouldn't have to pay double fees or anything like that. You'd get actually increased student finance. It does go up a little bit for being abroad, and student finance will also cover costs of flights. I believe it's a there and a back at the start and end, and if you're staying for the year, I believe at Christmas as well. can't take that for verbatim from me, afraid. I didn't do it personally, and it's not my area of expertise. But that is what I believe it to be. And I know student finance does increase for when the year study abroad is. Having a look just at the chat here. Yeah, it's some of them do offer, they tend to offer more courses that have a specific career path in mind and are tailored towards going into a particular sector or a job area rather than being an academic subject. So it fits very well for students who are going into particular areas.
I was just going to say really quickly, a good example, but for us is that if you do nursing, you tend to go to Northumbria because it's very specific. You do nursing, you do the nursing degree, you come out with to specifically go into that. In Newcastle, you can do medicine and or biomedical sciences as the more academic route, and that tends to be the difference in those two options. You both end up in the NHS, just that one has a very specific, you're going in to do this particular job once you've graduated kind of a deal. It is 2 o'clock already. I'm not quite sure where this hour's gone, to be honest. It feels like we've only just started to hit our straps in this, but we're already out. So, David, thank you so much for your time, for your knowledge, for your experience. It's always really helpful to have people talk about things like this. So thank you so much. I did mention again, if you've missed this, if you're stuck out early, if you know other people that are interested, we are going to hold this again in September. So you're more than welcome to come back. And all that's left for me to say is thank you again to everybody who attended. Thank you again to David, and enjoy the rest of your Thursdays, everybody. Hopefully we'll see you at an event soon. All right. Goodbye.